Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ya Shaykh Turaabi.
Your brother Turaabi, alhamdulillah.
They're not mutually exclusive. Jazakallah khair for joining me again for a conversation. I was very interested. There's something that you've talked about. I think you talked about it in one of our earlier talks, and then in the Telegram chat, you've touched on it here and there. But I find it extremely insightful and very intriguing. And I was really hoping that you could go more into depth about it, which is the story of Al-Baqarah in Surah Al-Baqarah in the Qur'an. You point out the ramifications of this story with regards to psychological colonization of the Bani Israel while they were in Egypt, in Masr.
Yes.
And then the long-lasting effects of the psychological colonization long after they had escaped from Egypt. Even with divine guidance in their presence, they were still struggling with or grappling with the after effects of what we would understand today as psychological colonization.
No.
And I think that mashallah, the things that you've touched on, you've just sort of touched the surface of it in our previous talks and in the chat. I would love for you to go through the layers of that, to really dig deep into that and explain it, because I think it's fascinating and very, very important for us to grasp, very important for us to try to wrap our minds around, because our situation isn't terribly different.
No, it is not. We begin with Basmala and Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah alladhi lam yazal aliman qadira wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin alladhi arsalahu ila nasi bashiran wa nadhira wa ala ali Muhammadin wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira wa ba'd. You know, Shaykh, this might get a little long. I don't want to give you a khutbah before Jumu'ah, but the ramifications of understanding the role of Surah Al-Baqarah in the life of a Muslim across every era in time is something that is tantamount to the spiritual growth and progress of every Muslim throughout the entire world. But speaking as an African American convert to Islam, after spending years not just as a Christian, but as someone who studied Christology on a scholastic and academic level. When you begin to compare and contrast and juxtapose the story of the children of Israel from a biblical lens to the lessons that we take from Bani Israel from the Islamic lens, it is earth-shattering. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَنَامٍ, that everything has a peak. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he said about this, and this hadith is narrated from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and Imam Abu Isa put it in his Sunan, just for academic integrity, we just want to put the sources there. Imam Ahmed collected it in his Musnad. Imam al-Bayhaqi collected it in his Shu'ab al-Iman. Ibn Hajar, rahmatullahi alayhi, he said that Sanam, it means an elevated or the most prominent part. So Sanam is sometimes used to describe like the hump of a camel, or even like the apex part of a mountain, like the peak of something, the acme of something. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ Sanam, everything has a peak or a high point or an acme. وَإِنَّ Sanam al-Qur'an, the peak of the Qur'an is Surah Al-Baqarah. It is this chapter of the Qur'an. I remember when I first became Muslim, and maybe you can relate to this, and maybe even some of our viewers, heritage Muslims or converted Muslims or even non-Muslims alike, who are like, I want to read Qur'an. I remember, saying, you open the book and the Qur'an is fascinating in and of itself. It has an opening but no closing. It has a Fatiha but no Khatima. And that can be a talk, for another time in and of itself, subhanAllah. But right after you see the opening, which it makes sense to most people, then you see the cow. And for most chapters of the Qur'an, the name of the chapter is found in the earliest part of the surah, But for Surah Al-Baqarah, you have to go 67 ayats before you get to the story. You have to go 67 verses before you get to it. And Surah Al-Baqarah is the second chapter of the Quran, has 286 ayat, Kufa count. So it's the longest chapter of the Quran by a long shot. And it is, subhanAllah, a very, very dense surah. You get everything from the creation of Adam to rulings on Hajj and Haid. You know, if you know, you know. You get everything from Ramadan to Riba. The longest verse in the Quran, Ayatul Dain, as it's colloquially called, is about contracts, and it fills an entire page. And for anyone who's ever seen a 15-line Mus'haf, one verse covering a full page is incredible. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he continued in this hadith that وَفِيهَا آيَةٌ هِيَ. In it is a verse which is Sayyidatul Ayil Qur'an. It is the leader of all of the verses of the Qur'an. And in this chapter, Surah Al-Baqarah, is Ayatul Kursi, which again could be another conversation for another time. The 255th verse in Surah Al-Baqarah is a verse that describes the attributes, features of God Almighty, creator of the multiverse as we know it and don't know it. So this surah has all of these features. This chapter of the Quran has all of these features, but it's named the cow. Just name the cow. You think to yourself, like, what is that? And then when you see the story itself, it's only like 6 verses or 7 verses. So out of 286 verses, the story that this is named after is just a handful. So you got to timeline this, because as I mentioned earlier, the Quran has an opening, but it doesn't have a closing, and that's a part of its miraculous nature. You can read from any part of the Quran and connect it to other parts of the Quran. So it is not a book that in any sense needs to be read or understood chronologically in order to derive benefits and reflection from it, but there is chronology in it. And Musa, Prophet Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, is the most mentioned prophet in the entire Quran. 36 different chapters out of 114, over 130 different mentions. This story of Al-Baqarah is a story about him and the children of Israel. Just again, timelining this in the chronology of the children of Israel, it said that Moses spent 40 years calling Pharaoh, to free the children of Israel. And we'll get to how they got enslaved. Like I said, it might get a little long. We'll get to how they got enslaved, but he spent 40 years calling Pharaoh to free the children of Israel. Verses mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, the 7th chapter of the Quran, all the way to Surah Al-Nazi'at, the 79th chapter of the Quran, of all of these signs, these ayats, these signs and miracles that Allah had empowered Moses with. The story in Surah Shu'ara of Moses going and inviting Pharaoh to believe in the Creator and to free the children of Israel, and the story of the magicians converting to Islam after seeing the true signs from God Almighty overtaking their magic with a K, right? Their sihr. So that happens for 40 years. And then finally, the children of Israel are able to escape. And the children of Israel, they see all of this throughout this time period, right? They're not a passive participant. They are first row audience to all of this. And they know the mission is their freedom. So now they're finally free. We get to the verses in Surah Al-Shu'ara. The army of Pharaoh chases after them. They have an army behind them. They have the Red Sea, the ocean in front of them. And they see with their own 2 eyes, after thinking that, victory or that victory was snatched from the jaws of defeat at this point, that everything is about to be destroyed. What was the point in us leaving? And now they're going to overtake us. It's going to be worse than ever. Musa alayhi salam with the asa, with the staff that he had carried all the way from the verses in Surah Taha, just again painting this picture here across all these verses, takes this staff that he used to beat down bushes and guide his sheep with, hits the ocean and sees it split in 2. They cross, and then Pharaoh comes after them, the ocean closes, they are saved, and they see their oppressor and his army drown. Bani Israel watched the waves literally close in on the centuries of tyranny that had defined their existence, that had defined their slavery for so long. So now they physically stood free by Allah's decree. The tyranny had been washed away into the sea. But freedom of body is not freedom of heart or freedom of mind. And that's where the story comes in. Now, we get Musa alayhi salam, the verses in Surah Taha. He goes to receive revelation from God Almighty. At Mount Tur, he receives revelation of the Torah. And when he comes back down, he sees them worshiping a golden cow. Okay, he sees them worshiping a golden cow at the incitement of whom? Samiri. Now, I know I'm saying a lot of words and vocabulary here. We'll unpack each of these parts here as we dive into it and what this has to do with Qur'anic psychological decolonization. But just rock with me a little bit, audience. I know the Shaykh is here for it, but just rock with me a little bit here.
Yeah, okay? Let me just say,
please jump in. Yeah.
On this point, you can't use, or you can't try to engage in Qur'anic psychological decolonization unless you're familiar with the Qur'an.
Yeah.
So a lot of us aren't, astaghfirullah. But many of us don't read the Qur'an, even in our own language. I'm talking especially about the people who mostly need Quranic psychological decolonization among the Muslims are going to be the people who don't really even have access to the Arabic Qur'an.
Sure.
People who only have access to the English Qur'an. And then even when they have access to the English Qur'an, don't read it. And you only know about the Qur'an just like, astaghfirullah, just like the Christians only know about the Bible what their preacher tells them on Sunday. Many of our people only know from the Qur'an what the Imam says in the khutbah. So no, you have to become very familiar with these stories because every single word was revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was revealed with reason that will resonate and that will be relevant and that will be significant and will be important for all times to come. Every word, every letter of every word. So you can't just sort of say I'm kind of more or less familiar with the story and just go with that. No, you have to read it. You have to read it. You have to understand it. You have to analyze. You have to reflect upon it. And you have to take time. You have to take the time to do that, to reflect upon it, to meditate upon it, to think about it, to speak about it with others, and to really analyze it. And hopefully you can have a good scholar or a good learned person in your masjid who can also help you not only with recitation but also with tafsir and the meanings of the words and the asbab of the revelation, the reasons for the revelation, the cause, the circumstances and the occasions upon which things were revealed, and so on and so forth. You must be, when we talk about epistemological sovereignty, and I'm sorry to sort of interrupt what you're talking about. We'll get back to it, inshallah. But it is very important when we talk about epistemological sovereignty. For us, the foundation of our epistemology is Qur'an. That's the foundation upon which we build our knowledge of everything in the world, everything in the dunya and everything in the akhirah. So we have to, if we're going to use the Qur'an as our foundation, well, you have to read it, you have to understand it, you have to be familiar with it, you have to become a student of the Qur'an. I'm not saying that everyone has to become a Hafiz Qur'an or anything like that, but you have to be very familiar with our book, with the book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. And as you said, obviously this is a topic that could become a whole other discussion, and you would be much better at that discussion than me with regards to why there's an opening and not a closing. But the first thing that occurs to me is that because the Qur'an doesn't end. It opens and it doesn't end. It will continue to be relevant, just like what I was saying with regards to the Bani Israel. They went astray and they were psychologically colonized even while divine revelation was present among them. Well, divine revelation is present among us. It's present among us. Just because Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam isn't present alive with us today, the revelation is here today, and it's a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's preserved for us, so that there will never be a Muslim on the face of the earth from 1400 years ago until today and until the last day. There will never be a Muslim on the face of the earth who doesn't have access to revelation. So yes, you have to actually become not just sort of passively, casually familiar with the stories in the Quran and with the ayat of Quran, with the rules and with the analogies and the parables and the the wisdom, just generally speaking. But you have to become very, very intimately familiar with the Quran because it's the basis of our foundation. It's the basis of our knowledge. It's the foundation of our knowledge, and we're not going to be able to build any epistemological sovereignty that is not rooted in a deep understanding of the Quran. And I'm sorry, that's enough of my interruption. Please continue.
It's not an interruption. Alhamdulillah, it's a conversation. And you and I, we've built together. We talk often enough. And the truth is that a lot of Muslims really need to internalize this story and not in passing. But not to go on too much of a tangent, but you made a lot of excellent points. We have an epistemological framework for how we understand revelation and application. And there's been far too much hyper-Christianization of the Muslims' approach to understanding our relationship with God and our application of divine direction. A lot of it comes from colonized mindsets. And so we have a framework of usul tafsir, foundational principles that we use to consistently apply how to extrapolate and understand the meaning of the Quran, haqiqi, majazi, literally, metaphorically. And without that framework, you cannot engage in tafakkur, in tadabbur. You cannot reflect on how the Quran applies to your day-to-day life. You cannot contemplate reasonably on what you're supposed to do with those reflections. At tafakkur, what tadabbur. And so with the advent of the internet and everything being Googleable and everything, becoming bite-sized and most people never opening a book or reading anything for themselves, and self-study in more cases than not being so algorithmically driven that people's understanding is really just the parroting of what someone else understood without understanding to what extent that person understood it. And then thinking that you understood it. This is how Bani Israel followed Samiri and built a golden calf. Hey guys, get the gold. You hear the sound? You're taking other people's mindset and you're taking other people's understanding and you're using it to construct something that you may be inadvertently be using to worship other than God. And look, I'm not going to take too many shots at the Christians. You know what I'm saying? I know y'all be watching. I'm not going to get into, the proverbial quote unquote agnostic Muslims who believe but don't practice or anything like that, but that's why the story is in the Quran. Not to hold up a magnifying glass and to highlight the faults of others, but to hold up the mirror and to look at yourself and to understand where you might fit on the spectrum. And more than that self-reflection, as a Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us, and it's also found in the Athar from Abi Hurairah to radiallahu an, in Adab al-Mufrad, this hadith found in Sunan of Imam Abi Dawud as-Sajistani in his book of Sunan, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the believers are mirrors to one another. If you see something wrong in it, you have to correct it. If you look in the mirror, and pardon the analogy, but let's just keep it frank here. If you look in the mirror and see a booger in your nose, you don't wipe the mirror. You get tissue and you clean your nose. And far too often, many Muslims with snot-filled noses are trying to scrub and Windex the mirror that they're looking into, as opposed to grabbing a Kleenex and cleaning your stuff first, And this story highlights that. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the introduction of this story, there was some background here, but let me just start with the ayat, okay? In Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 2, verse number 67, the children of Israel came to Musa. Bani Israel came to Moses, alayhi salam, peace and blessings be upon him. And they said, we want you to get ask your Lord who killed this man. There was a murder in their ranks. So this is after all the signs and stuff that they had seen. And this is after the story, some scholars said like Ibn al-Qayyim, rahmatullahi alayh, that this happened after the worshipping of the golden calf. And we will circle back to that story, but just introduce this story itself. Inna Allah ya'murukum an tadbahu baqarah. Okay, you want to find out who murdered this person? Your Lord has commanded you to slaughter a cow. That's the 67th verse of the Quran. Whenever Musa said this, God told you to do this thing, to kill a cow. They said, Attakhiduna huzua or huzua, different riwayah. Are you mocking us? Are you making fun of us? And then Musa alayhi salam said, A'udhu billahi an akunu min al-jahilin. I seek refuge in Allah from being amongst the people who are ignorant. They saw for literally decades Musa be very serious about the commands of Allah subhanahu. And now all of a sudden when they put the command of Allah, when he alayhi salam puts the command of Allah in front of them after everything they saw from him, you could see that their pushback against the command of Allah was a reflection of the shackles and the captivity and the enslavement that did not drown in the sea with their oppressor and their enslaver. They held on to something, that honestly, far too many of us hold on to. Sometimes it's just our shahawat, our desires. Sometimes it's just our own jahala, our own ignorance. Sometimes it's our arrogance. But that thing has to be killed. You have to kill those cows, whatever it is. One of the many, many categorical differences, and I always find it to be so ridiculous when people try to make it seem like all religions are the same. Just your absence of a religion is a religion in and of itself. But that doesn't mean that every religion or every belief system can just be put in the same box. Like your reductive outlook does not reflect the reality. And Islam is definitely different. Just how did we get here in the first place of the children of Israel being enslaved, of them worshiping a golden cow, of now they're being asked to kill a cow to find out why someone was murdered and them pushing back against that? How did we get here? Well, the children of Israel made it to Egypt in the first place. Yaqub and the Asbalt, Jacob and the 12 tribes of Israel, they came there because of Yusuf alayhi salam, because of Joseph. And this is the longest story in the book of Genesis, which is one of the longer chapters or books of the Bible. But when we say Joseph in the Bible, we're not talking about Yusuf alayhi salam, because the slander is just too ridiculous to say they're the same person. But that's neither here nor there. You'll note that in the Quran, in Surah Yusuf, chapter 12, verses 43 to 54, that Yusuf alayhi salam, he refers to the king of that time as Malik. And that the term Fir'aun is not utilized until you get to Musa alayhi salam. This is just one of several reasons why you can't just have a peripheral understanding and think it's all the same, because in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 14 centuries ago, him making those distinctions isn't the same, wasn't based upon the same reasons why we know those distinctions are so incredible today with the Rosetta Stone and reading the hieroglyphs and all that stuff. Because what we know is during the middle to second intermediate period in Egypt, this is just a fun fact, as we build the point here, that they did refer to the leader of Egypt as a monarch. They did not call that person Pharaoh. But then once you get to the new kingdom, then that's when they suddenly start using the title Fir'aun. And this is not a distinction that's made in the Bible. In the Bible, in the time of Joseph, it's Pharaoh. And in the time of Moses, it's Pharaoh. But in the Quran, the distinction actually reflects the historical accuracy. Now, just for those who are listening, you tell me how a man in the middle of the desert who couldn't read or write historically, not just by Muslim accounts, but historically, how he knew that difference. I'll give you one guess. Revelation, but neither here nor there. Why am I bringing that up? Because we see that when Yusuf alayhi salam was in Egypt, he had a powerful position, and the children of Israel were welcomed as special guests into that kingdom. They did not come there to be enslaved. They came there to be honored. Now, fast forward roughly some 4 centuries later, Musa alayhi salam is now having to free them. What happened? What happened? Well, it's what happens to a lot of us. It happens to us in our workplace, happens to us in our individual lives. It happens to the Ummah collectively. these highs and lows where we go from positions of power to positions of weakness. The fact that we have that delineation from the time of Yusuf alayhi salam to the time of Musa alayhi salam, from Joseph, peace and blessings be upon him, to Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, from power to enslavement to freedom, is a testament that we can at least acknowledge as Muslims. It may not necessarily always be the way that we prefer, but we can go from strength to weak to power again, to freedom again. But it has to start in here. We have to be willing to kill those proverbial cows. Now, I'm going to just say this point and then I want to hear from you, Shaykh. Why do they worship a cow? Of all things, when you go to Surah Taha, yes, the mooing sound, samity, so on and so forth. For those of you who know, you know. If you don't, I would say for now, this is just, an auxiliary point. It's not a primary one. Why, of all the things under the sun, did they worship a cow in Surah Taha? Why build a golden cow? And then why, of all the things to push back against, you kill cattle all the time. We eat cattle all the time. Why were they so resistant to kill a cow? Well, historically, in the time of Pharaoh, Apis was considered to be a sacred god, a false god that represented fertility and divinity, and was worshipped in Memphis. And there was a cult built around the cult of Apis. And Hathor was a cow-headed goddess of motherhood, false god, of course, and joy, that was often depicted nursing Pharaoh. So when Yusuf alayhi salam and his family come, they have their faith, they have, even the dream of the 7 cows and so on and so forth, 7 years and the droughts, all that stuff aside, okay. But now fast forward 400 years of generation after generation after generation of enslaved people having that imagery of shirk, of spiritual associationism, became so prevalent across a generation of generation that the symbols of servitude became the objects of their secret admiration that they inherited from their masters. And I can't help but reflect on my people, 400 years enslaved in the United States, taking on the enterprises and the belief systems of their proverbial masters. There's a book called How to Make the Ideal Slave from 1850. This is about 13 years before the Emancipation Proclamation, 15 years before Juneteenth. Some historians say that it's a false document, but the tenets of it are certainly true. The first of those 5 tenets is maintain strict discipline and unconditional submission of the slave, create a sense of personal inferiority so that blacks know their place, instill fear in the mind of slaves, teach slaves to take interest in the master's enterprise, and ensure the slave is uneducated, helpless, and dependent by depriving access to education and recreation. Of those 4 things, or of those 5 things, the 4th one stands out quite a bit. Teach the slave to take interest in the master's enterprise. The only reason why the children of Israel cared about cows at all was because it was a part of the master's enterprise and belief system. In a lot of ways, for my people, I'm speaking for my people, I don't need anyone else to do it for me, thank you, but I'll say for my people, that the investment into, sports culture, hip hop culture, brand culture, is a part of, decades of taking interest in the master's enterprise as a means of feeling that you have equal footing with them. And on a spiritual level, for a lot of Muslims in the West, they've become so invested in their Western or white or both master's enterprise that they take everything and filter it through the lens of whataboutism. They take everything and filter it through the lens of, but it's a different time and this, that, and the third, in order to validate what? The enterprise of whom? The belief systems of whom? And it makes it hard for that epistemological growth and Qur'anic application to exist, as you pointed out, Sheikh Shahid, with Muslims not really reading the Qur'an. Oh, I don't know Arabic. All the excuses kick in. But then you have access in English and multiple English translations and interpretations. Yeah, but it's not the actual language. Okay, so you won't read it. You won't learn the language. You won't read it in your language, and you won't try to apply it at all. So what then are you applying, O Muslim, to your life? What then are you using? Peripheral understanding of Islamic concepts filtered through the Western master enterprisal lens. And now when a simple command comes to kill your proverbial cow, it's pushback. It's pushed back. It's pushed back. Now, I want to stop there before we get to the story of the actual cow and things like that and how that applies today. But in you hearing this sort of transition from power to enslavement, and I drew the analogy of, the ideal slave and stuff like that, but that investment in the master's enterprising being a reflection point, not a tafsir, like an explanation, but just a reflection point on how it was Bani Israel's investment in their master's enterprise that made them default to all things to a cow, and that caused them to worship the golden cow, and that became the reason why they were resistant to just killing a cow, and how that mirrors the spiritual state of a lot of Muslims today. Any reflections from your end on this? I know it's a word salad, but
no, not at all. Of course not. Of course not. There's so many, brother. There's so many things to reflect upon. I mean, I think that one of the things I would say is, and I don't want to harp on this, even I already sort of mentioned something about this, but it's a very serious problem when we approach the Qur'an in sort of the same way that the Christians approach the Bible, and I think that the larger version of that is us approaching religion itself the way that Westerners do, because as we've talked about many times, even it's not right to say Christian, that the Christians are this way and that way, because these are Westerners. Their Christianity is this way because they're this way, and they made Christianity this way. Like I've said before, Rome didn't become Christian, the Christians became Romans. So this is a very Western, deeply embedded, deeply ingrained in their psyche, the way that they are, the way that they behave, the way that they process information, the way that they approach the world, their relationship with religion, and so forth. And we absolutely cannot afford to do that, because this religion is the truth, and the Qur'an is the truth from the creator of this world. So it's indispensable. The word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indispensable if you want to move around in this world in anything like success. And if you want to understand this dunya at all, you have to refer. And actually, like we talked about even in the last talk that we had, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you the truth, and that this is guidance for you. It's guidance for you. And without this guidance, you don't have guidance. That was one of the things that popped into my mind with what you were saying, because also the other thing that I was thinking about was, when you don't take the Qur'an seriously, and you just think that the Qur'an is sort of a feel-good book to make you a good person, to make you moral, to make you righteous, or what have you, the same way that the Westerners approach the Bible, or anyway, many of them approach the Bible in this way. And then even with that, you don't even approach the Bible. You just listen to someone talking about the Bible on Sunday. And unfortunately, many of us also don't read the Quran. We just listen to someone say something from the Quran that, to be honest, many people don't even know whether it's from the Quran or not, because it's just Arabic. He could be telling a joke in Arabic. You wouldn't know the difference. But when you don't take it seriously for what it actually is, then, for example, you don't think about the fact that these things happened. The stories in the Quran actually happened. These were actual people in an actual time, in actual circumstances, and then you have to try to imagine what that was like in real life. And like you talk about how when Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam went to Masr and he received honor, he eventually was given a position of some authority and some power and some respect and honor and dignity and so forth. Okay, imagine the scenario in real life, because this is something that happened in real life. The people are still kuffar. The people did not convert to Islam. The people did not convert to the religion of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. This is universally understood and agreed upon. So when Bani Israel were welcomed into Egypt, they were Muslims, believers, being welcomed, so-called welcomed, into a land of kuffar. That sounds familiar. You understand? I don't know why they did it, and you don't know why they did it, but I know they were kuffar. Maybe by giving them some degree of honor and respect and so forth was to make themselves look good, was to make themselves look beneficent, to make themselves look tolerant, to make themselves look multicultural, and so forth. But we know how they are. They demand assimilation. Their multiculturalism, their tolerance, and what have you, demands assimilation. And clearly, this was demanded of Bani Israel in Masr, clearly. Because again, this is just what happens. This is your rational, reasonable mind can tell you this is how this is going to go. This is what has happened every single time. Not just with the Jews, because of course they weren't Jews at that time. We're talking about Bani Israel. They were the Muslims of Bani Israel. They were the believers of Bani Israel. But we're talking about people with one belief system, Tawheed, going into a society of kufr, of shirk, of disbelief, in which they are the minority in a majority of disbelievers. Well, those disbelievers are going to be very uncomfortable with you and your belief system, and they will want you to assimilate. I think that you could make a very easy comparison between, say, the worship of the calf and the normalization of the worship of the calf, and how familiar that becomes to the Bani Israel, and how they start respecting it. Because first, when you start to assimilate and it's surface level, when you start to assimilate, it's surface level, and you have the code switching, right? When you're with these people, you talk a certain kind of way. When you're with these people, you talk another kind of way. With these people, you dress one way, you dress another way. You never really show your true self. It's a surface level assimilation, and that's with not just obviously with Muslims, with any immigrants, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about immigrants. Bani Israel in Egypt are immigrants. And they were treated in Masr the same way that immigrants are treated everywhere. You are expected to assimilate to the culture that you're in, and to behave like them, and to respect their ways, and to respect their society, to respect their norms, to respect their beliefs, and so forth. Otherwise, they'll send ICE against you. And it begins on a surface level. But over generations, brother, over generations, it starts to sink in.
Subhanallah.
Until eventually you have Muslims with Christmas trees, for example. You have Muslims thinking that, we should respect, I don't know, Santa Claus and Merry Christmas. And
all cows
and all
look the same to us. All cows.
Wallahi. Wallahi. So this is what I see. It's this story is also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, only Allah knows all of the reasons why this story is included, why it's important for us to know this story. But in our current circumstances, in the current circumstances of Muslims in the West, Muslims in the lands of Kufar, you should find this story very, very relatable. And don't just throw rocks at Bani Israel for their misbehavior and for their disobedience and for their pushing back and so forth, because you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing. And you have been under, to one degree or another, very similar circumstances. Okay, you're not slaves over there, but who isn't a slave over there? Let's be honest. The whole system is a slave system. So you've gone from you've gone into bondage that's just not official bondage, and you need to escape from that bondage the same way that Bani Israel needed to escape from that bondage. But I'm not saying that you have to necessarily leave, but you have to get the bondage out of your mind. And that
kill the cow.
Yes, you need to kill the cow. You need to do what you were told. You need to do what you were told. And obviously the reason for the selection of the cow was precisely to exorcise you, to exorcise the Bani Israel from the psychological colonization that they had formed over generations, over centuries, to where they had gotten this, through assimilation, they had developed a peculiar and undeserving and unworthy regard and respect for this animal, they have had accepted to one degree or another the Egyptians' reverence for this animal. And then also there's another aspect of it too, which I don't want to go on too much, but there's another aspect of it too, which is you have become used to people practicing a religion that is fundamentally unserious. That's fundamentally unserious.
It's true.
And all that there is the show of reverence, the performance of reverence, but not a religion that is do this, do that. Do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you. He gives you commands, He gives you orders, He gives you laws, He gives you rules, He gives you regulations, and you live by those. If Allah tells you to do something, you do it. They're not used to this. They're used to, they're used to Pharaoh saying that he's Rabb al-Alameen, that he's Rabb al-Ala, that he's the Most High, but he's the government. So there's also that you've also already put into their heads that the only one who can make the rules is the one who's sitting on the throne. You know, not that the rules come from revelation. The only one who can give you the rules is the one who's sitting on the throne, because the government is God and God is the government. They're one and the same under Pharaoh. So there's so many things that you can draw from this story. Wallahi, there's so many things currently that are relevant to you if you really make tadabbur and you really think about it and reflect upon this. And I don't want to cut you off, because I think you rushed a bit through the story. And I
haven't even gotten to the story yet. I've not even gotten to the story. You know, like I said, this one might be a long.
You take your time, brother, because this is all wisdom and this is all knowledge, and this is, as I said, we post on Middle Nation for posterity, not for popularity. So it's going to be in the record. This is a document. The entire Middle Nation channel is a document that, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, Muslims will be able to refer to for all time to come, and hopefully gain reward and gain benefit from it, gain knowledge and gain understanding from it. And this is a very important topic and a very important story to reflect upon and to dig deep into for insights in our current age. Because again, the Qur'an isn't just a book of generic wisdoms. It's not a book of aphorisms and axioms and whatnot. It's guidance for you every single day, from the day it was revealed, from the moment it is revealed until the last day. There is guidance to be found in it. You must take this very, very seriously. And it astonishes me how people can look into all sorts of other books. They'll make all sorts of efforts to read all sorts of other books, the whatever power, laws of power, Machiavelli, all of these things. You'll take all of these things for guidance, that they can teach you how to go through life. They can give you how to deal with people, how to deal with this and that and the other situation. And you don't look at the Qur'an and believe that it can give you much better than that. Real, practical, realistic, real world guidance for your life that can be found in the Qur'an. If you don't think you can find it in that, then you're just not thinking about the Qur'an the right way, and you're not approaching it the right way.
You mentioning this part is the reason why we actually are talking about this, because it's like, okay, you're a Muslim, you believe in the Qur'an, you believe in guidance from Allah, from God Almighty. Why don't you just follow it? But that is where the story of Al-Baqarah, this story, applies to so many Muslims, because it's like they knew Musa was a prophet. They had no doubt in that. They knew that Allah was with them. They saw it with their own two eyes. But kill a cow. Boom. Now you hit a wall. So what happened to all of your iman translating to following the command? What happened? That process is what a lot of Muslims have to overcome. Because, just to mention this, the story of Al-Baqarah comes before all of the ahkam that you get, all of the rules that you get in Surah Al-Baqarah. I mean, so many commands in Surah Al-Baqarah, which direction we pray, fasting in the month of Ramadan, rulings on, for women, divorce, riba, you get so many rules in this Hajj, so many rules in the surah. And the back end of the surah is full of things like this, but interspersed between them are stories. And, it's said of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhum, that some narrators say 8 years, some say 12, that he took almost around a decade to memorize the surah. It's not because he couldn't just cram it in. It's because of the density of the surah. What stops us for all this faith from following the command? This story becomes a perfect example of that. And notice how we can't talk about the story of Al-Baqarah without talking about Yusuf alayhi salam, because that's how they got there. But look at how Yusuf got there. He got there because he was sold into slavery by his brothers. He wasn't conquered by someone else. It was his own family. Of course, he forgave them at the end of the story, and he wasn't as vitriolic as he's displayed in the Bible. No, he was merciful, because that's how prophets are, and that's one of several distinctions between our book and theirs. But Yusuf went from slavery to power in his own story, and then Bani Israel went from that prestige to enslavement, and then freedom to then trying to get into the promised land, Philistine. May Allah return Philistine to the mu'mineen. Allahumma ameen ya dha fadl al-azim. That up and down in and of itself is its own reflection point. It is its own reflection point. But it is, as you said, once they made it there, Yusuf alayhi salam was the only believer, as far as we know, in all of Egypt. And he was a slave, and then he was a prisoner, and then he reached power by holding on to his ethics, not selling out, not being caught up over a cow, by doing what Allah commanded him at every interval. Being tempted by a woman of power did not cause him to sacrifice his deen, and he suffered for that. And then in prison, he stayed there for a long time, and then he came out with the mindset of helping the very people that wronged him, but upon the commands of Allah, upon the guidance. And that opened a way for the believers to join him there. So what were the compromises? 5 times in Surah Yusuf, I know we're not talking about Surah Yusuf, but you can't get to the story without him, alayhi salam. And this is actually highlighted by the story of the mu'min in Surah Ghafir, or also known as Surah Mu'min, the 40th chapter of the Qur'an, where he makes reference to the people of Pharaoh about Yusuf. So they knew about him. They knew that there was this degradation of their adherence to revelation over time. So how do you revive that? How do you restore that? You've got to go back to the Qur'an. هَذَا بَيَانٌ لِلنَّاسِ. This is the call and the clear instruction to all of humanity. Huda, guidance. وَمَوْعِظَةٌ, and clear instruction. لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, for the people who want to obey God. Taqwa, to know what Allah is pleased with and to do it, and to know what Allah is displeased with and to stay away from it. People have to convert their iman to taqwa. And this story shows that despite Bani Israel having all the reasons to have high iman, when it came to following the command, hit a wall. So, Imam Ibn Kathir, he mentions about this, this story, Kana rajulun min Bani Israel ghaniyan. There was a man from the children of Israel who was rich, extremely wealthy, who had a poor nephew who was faqir. He was destitute. And so his nephew killed him in order to inherit from him, to inherit from his uncle. So it was deceit and vying for, financial advancement that got us to the story in the first place. And when they discovered the body and they went to Musa and asked him, ask your Lord who killed this man. And he said, your Lord says, kill a cow. That's why they said, are you mocking us? Are you mocking us? Imam al-Baghawi in his tafsir, he said, لِبُعْدِ بَيْنَ الْأَمْرَيْنِ فِي الظَّاهِرِ. There seemed to be a disconnect. It seemed to be completely unrelated the command from God to kill a cow and the case that they were actually trying to deal with by way of murder. But if you have faith without trust, then it will translate to skepticism. And for far too many Muslims, their relationship with Islam is completely characterized by intellectual skepticism of, I don't get how these two things are correlated. I don't understand why God tells us to do this. I don't understand why God tells us to do that. And Imam Razi, Fakhruddin Razi, he said, فَكَانَ ذَلِكَ جَهْلًا. That was their ignorance, bi hikmatillah. It was their ignorance in the wisdom of God and why God told them to do that. Because they didn't get that, what was the wisdom behind it? That's where their resistance came from. But if they had done what God had commanded, then the wisdom would have become apparent to them, and any cow that they killed would have been sufficient. But they hit that wall, and that's why specifically Musa alayhi salam said, A'udhu billahi an akuna min al-jahilin. I seek refuge in Allah from being amongst the ignorant. They weren't ignorant in their textual knowledge. They were ignorant in their ability to acknowledge the wisdom of Allah and just do what he said. There's a different kind of ignorance there, where a person can quote Qur'an, a person can quote Hadith, a person can quote psychology, philosophy, secular fields, can reach a level in their academic understanding where they have all these letters behind their name from these so-called prestigious institutions. But if you're ignorant and trusting the wisdom of Allah, then what good does it do you to be knowledgeable in the textual proofs from God? That disconnect will always translate to resistance. And how did they resist? How did they resist? He said, what cow? All cows look the same to us. The first question, how old is the cow? Second question, what color is the cow? We can't tell the difference. Then give us more explanation. Imam al-Tabari in his tafsir, he said, وَلَكِنَّهُمْ شَدَّدُوا, because they made it hard. شَدَّدُوا, they made it hard. فَشَدَّدَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. Because of that, فَشَدَّدَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ, that Allah made it harder for them. So if they had just killed any cow would have done it. But because of their resistance, it not only delayed the answer that they were seeking of who killed the man, but the specific cow that they ended up having to kill was even more difficult. It said that there was a man, because by the time they finally get through everything, okay, it's a middle-aged cow that's never worked the land. It's extremely bright yellow in color, like almost golden. Sound familiar? And now they look through all of Bani Israel and they find a single man with this single cow. And it's his sole possession. And it's a cow that's never worked the field or anything like that. So he just loves the cow. And so his condition, you want to kill my sole prized possession? Okay, the price for it is its weight in gold. Bring me a hide, its hide worth of gold, its weight in gold, and I will give you the cow. So now it goes from just kill a cow to now the most specific kind of cow being the answer. And just to do some simple math with you all, a cow, average weight of a cow is about 1,200 pounds. You understand me? 16 ounces per pound, 19,000 ounces. 1 ounce of gold, $4,036.89 USD in 2025. That means that for a single cow, that the only thing they needed the cow for was to kill it, they paid $76 million USD, roughly. $76 million USD. The consequence in delaying obedience is always going to cost more in the end than it ever needed to in the beginning. Always, every single time. Our delay and our resistance of living more Islamically oriented lifestyles has a price that is far, far higher than need to be paid. And Shaykh, you brought this up. Muslims, Christmas trees, validating Halloween. Oh, this one Shaykh said that it's not really religious anymore. Ikhwati, according to Pew Research, 1 out of 4 heritage Muslims apostate from Islam. What do you think the key factors and contributions to that is? It's slowly but surely overcomplicating, just doing what Allah said to the point where what Allah said is no longer in your head. And then you're just Muslim in name and you're no longer Muslim in practice. And the price of losing a single Muslim is a price that we never ever need to pay. We just have to understand what Allah told us to do in the first place. Now, how the story ends, essentially, is after they kill this cow, this $76 million cow, they take a piece of its flesh. Some narrators said that it was a piece of its thigh. Some said it was a tongue of the cow. They struck the dead body. And then when they struck him, he came back to life. He came back to life. He said, my nephew killed me. And then he went back to the barzakh. He returned to his Lord. And Imam al-Qurtubi noted that this was a proof amongst the proofs of resurrection being made visible to them. Why? Why show them the proof that al-ba'th, that resurrection, is real? Because all of the things that you're using to delay your obedience to Allah in this dunya, you will be taken to task for in the hereafter, without a shadow of a doubt. All of the pushback that you want to give, all of the validation of your own, mindset in this world, if you don't kill that cow, then that cow will be a proof against you on the day of Deen. And, I want to say a little bit more about that point, but just want to pass it back to you, Shaykh, so I don't yap the whole time. And
not at all, brother. Not at all. I mean, the problem is that while you're talking, all of my synapses in my brain are firing. I mean, there are so many things. Again, there are so many things that come to my mind. Another aspect of it was that they're clearly coming from a society, and again, this is sort of a hallmark of societies of kufr, which is the disrespect for knowledge, and the disrespect for the knowledgeable, and their approach here to being told what to do by the man who could tell them what to do. When they asked Nabi Musa alayhi salam, and then he said, he didn't even say, I'm telling you to do this. He's telling them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you to do this. Your Rabb is telling you to do this. And you know that I have communication with Rabbil Alameen. And yet you reject it. You don't take it seriously. And then you push and push and push. I mean, there's something else to be said about the fact of how they pushed and how they overcomplicated matters. But there's just the fact of when you were talking about, for example, what you could say is sort of the learning process or the tazkiyah or the tarbiyah that people need. You want to dictate what you think you need, what the prerequisites are for you reaching a certain level of understanding, rather than understanding that the one who already is at that level of understanding is the one who can teach you how you can get there. And so you have to listen to that person, that man or woman or whoever it is, that scholar, that knowledgeable person. They're the ones who can tell you what you need in order to get here. But you want to dictate. I want to already be there. Who are you to tell me what I need to do? Because what you're telling me doesn't make any sense to me. In my ignorant state, it doesn't make sense to me. So therefore, you should change what you say. You're saying this to the knowledgeable people in an attempt supposedly to get some kind of knowledge. So you want their knowledge to now appeal to your ignorance, rather than your ignorance obey their knowledge so that you can reach that level. This is again something that we see all the time. We see it all the time. Like, for example, I mean, not to make any sort of a comparison here, but we're talking about knowledge and expertise. And like, say, for example, I won't even use myself, but say, for example, yourself, mashallah. You are fluent now in Arabic. You can read and write and speak Arabic, mashallah. So many people, obviously, Muslim or non-Muslim, anyone cannot do that. MashaAllah, you've only been Muslim for 12 years. I don't know when you mastered the Arabic language.
Well, I'm still mastering. I understand it better than I speak it. So to the awam, don't hit me with your Amiyah. I'll miss it.
I know this is always an ongoing process. Even if you're a native speaker, it's always an ongoing process with the Arabic language. It's very deep and very complex.
Sure.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I
Even
do.
it could be even it could be a different language. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
Maybe you would tell someone who comes to you and says, for example, this is just an example, I'm really having trouble learning Arabic. And then your answer is, do you sleep 8 hours a night? Do you get enough sleep? What does that have to do with anything, man? What are you talking about? I'm asking you about learning Arabic. What has that got to do with anything? Because you understand how much clarity your mind needs, how fresh your mind has to be in order for you to access the knowledge, how to retain the knowledge, how to learn and to remember the harf and the grammar and the so forth and all of these things. Your mind has to be sharp. If you're not sleeping enough, you're not going to be able to do it. If you're exhausted, if you're fatigued, you're not going to be able to do it. Okay, to me, in my ignorance, I don't see a connection between what you're asking me and what I'm asking you. And I'm so ignorant that I can't even acknowledge that you know what you're talking about and I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm asking the one who knows, but I'm still not listening. This is like exactly what they were doing. And I can only assume that this is because they're coming from a society, again, to which they have completely assimilated, bone deep assimilated, which is one of the reasons why they needed to be rescued to correct anyone's understanding, by the way. They weren't rescued because they were slaves. They were rescued because they needed to be guided. That was the thing that they needed salvation from. They needed salvation from how assimilated they had become and how much kufr had gotten into their system and into their minds and into their psyche and into their soul. That's what they needed to be saved from. And the only way, in their case, to save them was to get them out of there. That's not the case with everyone. But it's a misunderstanding if you think that that was a socioeconomic salvation or liberation. That's not what that was about. But they were coming from a society that didn't value knowledge and where the only thing that mattered there was power, which is why Pharaoh thought that it doesn't even make sense for someone to think that there's a God besides me. Because in this land, I have all the power. So that's what a God is. A God is the one who has power. So the only thing that mattered in that society, not unlike other societies we could name, the only thing that matters is power. And knowledge is not respected. And the ignorant can even insult and say that they can insult the knowledgeable and say that the knowledgeable are mocking them when the knowledgeable tell them what they need to do in order to become knowledgeable. No, you should just give me an app. I can download the knowledge. Make it easy for me. Tell me which news sources tell me all the right, correct, true, 100% verified information. Brother, it doesn't exist. You need to build the skills. That's right. It's not about what you read, it's about how you read, so you can understand things. But we're talking about people who don't respect all of the processes that are required in order for you to become a knowledgeable person. To the extent that they had gotten so far down this road of ignorance that they're questioning and challenging their prophet, who they knew was a prophet, who they knew had knowledge that no one else had, and asking for a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that could only be delivered to them through Nabi Musa. And when Nabi Musa alayhi salam responded to them about what had been revealed by their Lord, they didn't take it seriously. Because we just want a name. We want the name of the guy who did it. That's it. So if you're not giving us a name, I don't even think it was about, how unrelated it was. That's not what we wanted. I want you to tell me the name. And if you're not telling me a name, I don't have any use for your revelation, so-called. You know what I mean? The arrogance of the ignorant. And I've talked about this before, about how, like, with the kuffar in the West, their problem isn't ignorance, it's arrogance. And this is, again, a very characteristic thing about their society and their culture, is this arrogance. And you see this in the Bani Israel, this arrogance, the way they talk to Nabi Musa alayhi salam. And then with the arrogance of the insistence on, what kind is it? How old is it? or give us all the exact details. Can you actually just draw us a picture of exactly what it looks like and exactly where we'll find it, how many hairs it has on its body? These are people who don't want to do it. They're trying to avoid doing it. And I'm also reminded of how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there's a punishment for a man who questions to get the details about something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has left open. When Allah has not specified something, or when something has been left basically as what's the word? Mubah. And you question about it and question about it and question about it until maybe it becomes haram. Until in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you question him about this, that, and the other, until finally it becomes he has to forbid it.
Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 5, verse 101 and 102.
Subhanallah.
Asking. You just keep asking until you getting the answer of it just makes it harder on you.
Yes.
And in those verses, not to cut you off, but just there's verses in this in the Asbab al-Nuzul, like the reasons for revelation, is because of the people questioning the Prophet. We're encouraged to ask. You're encouraged to ask according to your level. You know what I mean? The merits of an answer is only as good as the merits of a question. And if most of the answers are there, then what does more questions add merit to exactly? Nothing. So Allah says that there were people who came before you, they disbelieved in their prophets because of their excessive questioning. So these are verses in Surah Thematic.
There's also a hadith about it, if I'm not mistaken, that's along the same lines. And this is also something, obviously, that we know is something that the Jews did. That they made for example, their kosher very complicated. Their rules about the kosher food, they made it very complicated. And Allah said He didn't make it complicated for them. They made it complicated for themselves. They made it difficult for themselves. And it's also like the hadith about religion. The religion is easy. Don't make it difficult. If you make it difficult, you won't be able to bear it. You go to extremes, you go too far, you burden yourself with religion, you won't be able to bear it. So all of these things come to mind in this story, and all of them again are all relevant for us in our daily life. I mean, especially what I was talking about in the beginning about, and this is why we get a lot of people in the Middle Nation discussion, by the way, who come in with a very Western approach to gaining knowledge. And very often either they don't last, either they get booted or they get muted. And if they get muted, sometimes they'll benefit. Sometimes they can keep their mouth shut. Sometimes that's what someone needs, just to understand. You need to close your mouth and listen. You're coming to a group to gain knowledge. You don't gain knowledge by talking. You only gain knowledge by listening. And there's the adab of how you learn. The adab of a student versus the adab of a professor, the adab of a teacher is different. The adab of a student is to be respectful and to just like even we have another case involving Nabi Musa alayhi salam with Khidr.
Yeah, you see the juxtaposition is just
Subhanallah.
The dichotomy is stark.
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
You know, with the bear with me, you will understand. But bear with me. And don't challenge and don't question me, then you will get the knowledge. Either way, you'll get the knowledge because I will explain it to you. But I only have patience for so much.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, our story will end.
Now, sometimes people even characterize Musa alayhi salatu wasalam as being impatient, as if he's like you and I, someone who gave da'wah to Pharaoh and went through everything he went through in his childhood and his entire life's journey. Like he's like just, he couldn't be patient with Khidr. No, if you read the story and you really think about it deeply and you explore the Qur'anic exegesis of understanding the nuance of that specific story in Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 18 the story starts at verse 60. Khidr said, "You will never be able to be patient with me. You know, how can you be patient with something you don't understand?" And in each of the three instances, and we can have this for a separate time, we need to cover reflections from the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. We need to talk about Musa and Khidr. There's a few things that are coming up here that we can make other conversations, because they really require their own haqq. Like, you got to give it its own right there. But, you know, every single instance, from marking the boat to killing the child to restoring the wall and not taking compensation for it, in the Sharia of Musa, each of those things were wrong. So he couldn't just be quiet about something that in his Sharia he knew was wrong. You know? And this is the role of every prophet. They can't just be silent and see something bad happen and just keep it to them. And Khidr knew this about him. But the challenge was that Khidr was given a command that was not within the same scope of that Sharia. And that's what made it hard to just, you know, to just abide by it.
The role of Nabi Musa alayhi salam, he was one of the first, if not the first, of the prophets who was a lawgiver. And so, if he sees something that's against the law that has been revealed to him, his job as a prophet, his job as a mu'min,
gotta say it.
No, this has to be enforced.
Yep.
I'm here to serve my Rabb. So for him, what we see as impatience was his obedience.
It was actually his obedience, yeah.
In his case, that was his obedience, and which is why, as you said just now, which is why Khidr knew, you're not going to be able to be patient with me, because you're not allowed to be patient with me.
not in these things, no. And they clarified at the end of the story, like, everything I did was from Allah. It wasn't something from my own self. You know, that's the ta'wil of the things that you couldn't be patient with. That's how the story ends. This is the ta'wil. This is the interpolation of why I did the things that you would never be able to be patient with. It's a different set. But you know, Nuh alayhi salam, just because, you know, you always get the internet, the keyboard warriors in the comment section. Nuh alayhi salam was the first Rasul. Okay, but Musa was definitely also a prophet and a messenger.
Yes, I didn't say that he was the first Rasul. I said he was the first
one of the
lawgiver.
first. Lawgiver.
He was the first lawgiver. He came with laws.
So you know, this. Maybe let me just get the comment section experts out of my head here. I'm still new to this, you know. Best, you know, one of the things that comes to mind with with several of the points that you mentioned was just Samity and the role of Samity. He convinced them, فَقَالُوا هَذَا إِلَهُكُمْ وَإِلَهُ مُوسَى. He convinced them that cow, that golden cow that he created, was not just their God, but also the God of Musa, even though Bani Israel knew better. But in their weakness, they accepted that cultural nostalgia and that need for visible gods that turns religion into spectacle. That the spiritual experience has to be a spectacle, you know. But the followers, so some of Bani Israel, they followed Samiri, and of course it's before Al-Baqarah, and some followed Harun, and they said, وَإِنَّ رَبُّكُمْ Rahman, and that your Lord is not this cow, it is the most merciful, the creator of everything that exists. And so there was Harun's camp that stayed away from the shirk of worshiping the golden cow, and then there was Samiri's camp that did go through with that. And the spiritual consequence that befell Samiri for that in Surah Taha chapter 20 verse 97 was that he lived an entire life where no one would ever touch him again. He went the rest of his life with a spiritual infection that translated to lifelong quarantine. When you distort what it means to believe and worship Allah, you are quarantining yourself off from the greater spiritual community for the instant gratification of some form of spiritual spectacle. Now, even though the people who worship the golden cow were dealt with, even though Samiri was dealt with, what was not dealt with was that some people still had that veneration for cows in their heart. And that's why Allah told them to kill a cow. That's why Allah told them, kill a cow. Kill off the rest of that little remnant in your house. You know, I can't help but think of Malcolm X, rahmatullahi alayh, in his 1963 speech, Message to the Grassroots, where he said at California State University,
there are two kinds of slaves. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. And the house Negro, they lived in the house with the master and they dressed pretty. They dressed pretty good and they ate pretty good because they wore his clothes and they ate his food. And when the master got sick, the house Negro would say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick?" But the field Negro has a completely different mindset. Now, of course, we're not using that analogy of Malcolm X, rahmatullahi alayhi, may Allah have mercy on him, to say that Samity's camp was like the house Negro or that, the true believers are like the field ones. No, right? But what it does bring to mind is when you're all living under the same slave master, the relationship with the master may change the outlook of what enslavement looks like. And that enslavement for people who have essentially taken refuge in those awliya besides Allah in the spider's web, shout out to the last one, they think it's comfy and cozy. They think that this is all that there is to strive for. But those who see the reality of what that enslavement means, in this case, house Negro, field Negro, Malcolm X is drawing an analogy between what our ancestors had to endure versus the mindset of people in this time today. And that's where in his autobiography, he talks about the Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom doesn't wear a handkerchief on his head. Sometimes he's known as professor or doctor or judge or reverend. His profession is being a Negro for the white man. This is how Malcolm X had characterized it. Samity had brought that same sort of mindset of adherence to the slave master's enterprise well after they had been far removed from it. You gotta see if there's some Samites in your camp, and you need to be careful letting them convince you to take false idols under the pretense that no, this is actually revelation from God Almighty. It's not a slippery slope fallacy, but it can become a slippery slope spiritually. And this is something that people have to be cognizant of. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the hadith in Musnad of Imam Ahmed, and it's also brought in Sunan of Imam Abu Isa at-Tirmidhi, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they saw a tree, that used to be called that's unwet. This tree that they used to hang their weapons from, and that's unwet was something that whenever the Sahaba saw it, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, why don't you give us a tree like theirs? They're not saying give us the shirky pagan whatever, but just give us a tree like theirs. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahu Akbar, you have said as Bani Israel said to Musa, give us a God like the God of the people who came before. That emotional nostalgia for the old symbols of colonization, of slavery, becomes a recurring disease that the Prophet ﷺ diagnosed would befall his ummah. The hadith in Sahihain and Bukhari and Muslim, that you will follow those who came before you, span by span, cubit by cubit. Even if they entered into a lizard hole, you would follow after them. They said to the Prophet ﷺ, are you talking about the people of the book? He said, who else? Who else could I possibly be referring to? So you see that just as Bani Israel wanted to follow the tendencies of the people that they were freed from, even beyond that enslavement, you can see that with that colonized mindset, if you don't kill that cow, you will slowly but surely follow these people right down into the lizard hole too. And to the point where you might adopt, as Malcolm X, rahimahullah, described it, a house Negro kind of mindset, where you unconsciously defend the very people that the minute they get the chance, they will literally put you under their heel. And will prefer for you to be there, to not see them eye to eye, but for you to always look up to them. Now, this is some of what I could say, but we've already been talking for a while. Bismillah, Shaykh. I want to hear a little more from you and your reflections on that point.
I mean, I would go back again to the issue of assimilation, and to the idea of the fact that. Like, for example, when you talked about the book, creating the ideal slave? Is that what it's called? Or training the ideal slave?
Yeah,
how to make the ideal slave. If you just soften the edges of that a little bit, it's nothing but assimilation. If we take it out of the context of actual bonded slavery, chattel slavery, if we take it out of that context, and just put it in the context of the West's concept of tolerance, the West's concept of multiculturalism, which is, as I've talked about before, you can be Muslim, you can be so-called black, you can be so-called brown, you can be from any country whatsoever, as long as you are exactly like a non-Muslim white person. In every other way, in your mind, in your heart, in your soul, in your aspirations, in your values, in your priorities, we want non-Muslim Muslims, we want white black people, we want white brown people, we want non-religious religious people. This is our multiculturalism, this is our tolerance. You can be with us as long as you assimilate and imitate and mimic and become as much like us as you can, except insofar as what is visible in your immutable characteristics, which we will surely discriminate you against over. But it's this assimilation, which is, as you said, I think you said the fourth point was to take interest in the master's enterprise. And this is very tragic when you think about it. It's very tragic because to one extent or another, they put you in a position where you're taking interest, like when we're talking about immigrants and assimilation. When you talk about, for example, we go back to the original story that we're talking about, the Bani Israel coming into Misr, coming into a society of kufr, a society of shirk, where they believe in tawheed, where they have tawheed, they believe in their prophets, they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're coming into a society not unlike the society that you're in, brother, and the societies in the West, unbelieving societies. And you want to be safe in that society. You want to fit in, you want to assimilate, and you want to show them that you can be acceptable, that you can be accepted. You want to show them because you're in danger. The fact of the matter is you are in danger. You're outnumbered, you're strange, you're different, and the reality of the matter is you're unwelcome. Unless you can prove to them that you don't pose any sort of I won't even say a threat, discomfort, inconvenience. So you have to take an interest in their enterprise just to show them that you're not the field slave. You have to prove to them that you're the house slave. They make it in your interest. It's not just that the house slave has an interest in his master and his master's well-being. It's because he must. Otherwise, he's going to be in the field. He has to do that. It's not just that he's this way. He is made this way by exactly what you're talking about. Because you're not safe. You don't want the lash. You don't want the whip. You don't want to be out in the field and get what the field slaves get. So you must say, we have a nice house here, boss. You must say it's we. You must say, boss, we sick, we're the same. You must say that. You must put it like this because you know that he doesn't think of you like that. So you have to insist upon it. That's why you find so many immigrants who are more American than American. Why you find so many immigrants with American flag tattooed all over the place. American flag on their wall, American flag on their bumper sticker, American flag on the back of their car, American flag t-shirts, American flag underwear. Like someone's gonna look. Maybe they're afraid they're gonna get stopped by ICE and strip searched and there's proof to them with their underwear that they have the American flag. Look, I'm more American than you. You understand?
Yeah.
This is how they become, because they're scared. It comes from fear. It comes from knowing, actually, in your heart of hearts, these people don't want you here. The truth of the matter is these people don't want you here. They don't trust you. They don't like you. You make them uncomfortable. So you have to prove that you're more like them than they are like themselves. And when you do that, you lose yourself. And this is what happened to Bani Israel. They lost themselves. And this is why Allah, by His mercy, sent them Nabi Musa alayhi salam to get them out of there. And it's a bad situation when you've gotten so far into that assimilation, and that assimilation becomes the complete self-negation. When you've gotten so far into that the only way to save you is to literally physically get you out of that place. So don't ever let yourself get that far. I mean, if you can make, we've talked about it many times, and people come in the chat many times talking about hijrah. And I know that the comments will probably on this video, we'll talk about hijrah. Okay, brothers and sisters, if you can do it, do it. But first of all, it's not hijrah. You can pray in the United States. You can pray in the West. You can make your salah. You can fast Ramadan. You can do all of the things that you need to do as a Muslim. Your fara'id, you can, your wajibat, you can do all of that in the United States, even if it's not comfortable for you. But the discomfort of doing it, inshallah, you get more ajr for doing it. And inshallah, bi'ithnillah, you might bring people to Islam by what you're doing, inshallah, bi'ithnillah. But if you can get out, and if you know that the only way that you can save your mind and save your soul and save your heart and save your children is to get out, then get out. But either way, get out mentally, get out psychologically, get it out of your heart and get it out of your mind. As much as you possibly can, and don't try to ingratiate yourself. Go ahead and be a field slave. Go ahead, because they think of you that way anyway. They do think of you that way. They will always think of you that way. It doesn't matter how much you humiliate yourself and talk about boss, we sick. It doesn't matter. You're humiliating yourself. And if you talk about, yeah, boss, we got a nice house here, the White House. He's never going to think of that as shared property. He's never going to think your name is not on the deed, and it's never going to be on the deed. It never will be. So you know, it's just this very, very dangerous process of assimilation. It starts on the surface, but it bleeds in until it bleeds you out.
You know, that point that you made, because it is. And I'm sure some history buffs, we don't know if it was actually written in 1850. It doesn't matter. The truth is, this is how they lived. You know, this is how they thought. Maintain strict discipline and unconditional submission. That's what the system forces upon you, and it does punish you if you do not 100% comply. And that mindset of assimilation is more than just trick-or-treating Muslims, or, you know, they see Muslims trying to figure out a way to do turkey biryani or something like that. You know what I'm saying? As disgusting as that sounds. Yeah, it does, because it's like, you know, the fashionista hijabi, assimilating the look to something palatable. The red pill Muslim bro, who is essentially just regurgitating Kafir talking points about their perception of the female as opposed to the Imanic understanding of a woman.
That's where the real depth is. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No. It's a conversation.
Even the sisters changing how their hijab is to try to look fashionable and all of these things. This is also still surface level. Mm-hmm. Even if you're talking about Muslim kids going out trick or treating or what have you, this is still surface level. I'm not saying it's good or bad or what have you, but sure, it's surface level. But when we're talking about it's affecting the way you think, it's affecting your paradigms of how you view the world, what your worldview is, what your relationship is with the truth, what your relationship is with the Qur'an, the way you understand deen, the way you understand religion, the way you understand the Ummah, the way you understand even very, very importantly, al-wala wal-bara. The way you understand the distinction between kufr and iman, between truth and falsehood. When this starts your brain starts to malfunction, and it starts to malfunction in a very Western way, in a very kufri way, this is when we're getting, you're in a very, very serious state. And I don't know if you're going to survive in Islam, but I doubt very much if your children will. If they're being raised by someone who's this profoundly confused, and who is so profoundly westernized.
It's that personal inferiority complex, that comes from, you know, that fair and lovely culture, white is right, and might makes right. You know, it's from both in the global South, people who immigrated to the United States with that, but as well as people who grew up in the society and felt like the unshackled shahawat, the unshackled desires of their non-Muslim classmates, neighbors, college goers, and so on and so forth was freedom, and that you are inferior because you are controlling yourself. And that's why, you know, from the Middle Nation perspective, when we start talking about psychological decolonization, we have izzah, we have extreme honor and pride humbled that Allah granted it to us, but very proud to have the imanic superiority that comes with saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And we don't need to make it seem like that is like everyone else, or who are you to judge? Observations are not judgments. Allah will judge. Wallahu ahkam al-hakimin. Naam, tafaddal.
I'll go back to something that you said earlier about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. That he rose to a position of honor in that society. He was given a position of authority by not compromising his integrity, by not compromising his beliefs, by following his beliefs, by following his integrity, by having self-respect, by keeping his own dignity. And then I'll link that to the statement of Umar bin al-Khattab about our source of izzah, our source that the Arabs were a disgraced people, were humiliated people, until Islam came, and Islam gave them honor. Islam gave them nobility. Islam gave them dignity. And if we start looking for dignity outside of Islam in anything else, according to any other criteria, we will be humiliated again. We'll become again a humiliated people. So this connects again with and again it goes also back again to the deeper levels of assimilation. Until again, it's not it isn't assimilation, it's self-negation, it's self-nullification, it's self-replacement, to where what you were is no longer what you are, and you are now whatever it is that they wanted you to be, which is just a carbon copy of them, which is never going to be as valuable to them as the original anyway. So there's no point in you trying to copy them. You understand what I mean? It's like you're never going to be them. You will always they will just get satisfaction from the humiliation that they're putting you through to make you try to act like them. They get satisfaction from the humiliation of you, getting you to deny what you are, where you came from, what you believe, for our sake, which shows us how important we are and how unimportant you are. So even your assimilation is just a reinforcement of their supremacy over you and your belief in their supremacy over you. Your assimilation is a reinforcement of the belief in their supremacy and the belief in your inferiority. The only thing that you can do is actually stay true to Islam, and even I will say for non-Muslims, for non-Muslim immigrants in the West, even if you're not a Muslim but you come from the global South, keep your culture, keep your heritage. Don't try to assimilate and try to prove to them that you can be like them, because you cannot be, and they will never accept you as one of them ever. And the only thing that they will ever get from your attempts to win them over, to ingratiate yourselves to them, is how much more important they are and how much more powerful they are and how superior they are to you. And that you're going along with that line of thinking. So whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, you keep your culture, you keep your identity. Unless, of course, you just are non-Muslim and you come to Islam, which is the best thing you could do. And in that case, you'll still get to keep the best things of your culture and your identity.
That's right. And don't let the indoctrinated house Muslim make you think that the only culture that exists is the custom of the land, and that the custom of the land is reflective of the oppressors of those lands. You know what I'm saying? It ain't about me, but, as a Black convert, I have a certain vernacular. I have a certain way of dressing, a certain way of carrying myself. And if I choose to put on a thobe, someone will tell me that's an Arab culture. You know what I'm saying? As if this is not a part of our academic tradition. Don't let anybody try to instill the personal inferiority complex that was used to make the ideal slave know their place, or the consequences of stepping out of line that was used to instill fear in the minds of those slaves, or the teachings of making a person feel like investment in the master's enterprise is a path to freedom, when that is its own form of enslavement, even if you live in a large house, have multiple cars, and a perfect credit score. Don't let them ever make you forget that one of the primary ways of making an ideal slave is to keep them uneducated, helpless, and dependent, and Western education doesn't translate to somehow not being uneducated, somehow not being helpless, somehow not being dependent, because there's a deeper education that is necessary for your soul to actually be free no matter where you live in this world.
We went from Yusuf alayhi salam to Musa alayhi salam, freedom of Bani Israel. And I always find it fascinating how in the Qur'an, when Allah calls Bani Israel, when he calls them Yahud, but that's a different conversation for another time. We'll bring that up another time. The specification of the Qur'an is a miracle in and of itself. Don't let people let you think that scientific miracles is all we got here. No, Bismillah. There's some incredible precision in every ayah, in every line, in every letter of the Qur'an. Subhanallah. But we go from Yusuf to enslaved people, Bani Israel, freed from Pharaoh, Musa alayhi salam. They worship the golden calf. Samity gets cast out. The people who committed the shirk get dealt with. And now there's this remnant in the heart of kill your cow. And then we get the story that Surah Al-Baqarah is named after. The Sanam, the peak of the Qur'an, is named after this story, as if from a reflective perspective, Allah is telling you, in this surah is going to come a lot of rules, a lot of things that Allah is going to tell you to do. And if you harbor anything in your heart that you have made equal to Allah, you will never ever be able to fulfill it. Something will be compromised somehow, some way. You may keep Ramadan, but then cut corners on riba. You may, you know what I'm saying? You may make Hajj, but cut corners on, matters of talaq and divorce and marriage and things like this. You have to kill the cow for full submission to Allah. As Allah tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, I believe it's verse 165. Oh, you who believe, enter into Islam kafa, completely, 100%. 2% milk might still be milk, but 98% Muslim is not full Muslim. You got to be 100%. The Istislam has to be absolute 100% there. Now, after the story of Al-Baqarah, again, we're just following the chronological timeline of Bani Israel. And, some scholars say, okay, Khidr happened at this time. Actually, no, this story happened at this time. But the gist of it is we're seeing this sort of natural progression. And then you get to Surah Al-Uqud. You get to Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th chapter of the Qur'an. And in, I think, verse 23, someone in the comment section, you can discount, double check for me. But in verse 23, this is where you get Yusha and Caleb. Yusha, the same Yusha that was with Musa and Khidr. These young men who grew up and saw these things with their two eyes. Saw what it was like to go from enslaved to free. And now the promised land is right here. They were the only two people from all of Bani Israel who was willing to step up. So killing the cow and the veneration of the shirk culture was one thing. But then trusting Allah for the next stage was something else. And it was because of the resistance. Now it's not about the shirk or the colonized mindset that you took from, centuries of paganism and enslavement and stuff. Okay, now the cow has been killed. Now Allah is telling you enter into the promised land. But they still had that inferiority complex and they still had that fearful mindset that made it hard for them to do it. They said, Musa and Harun, you go fight with your Lord. And that resistance to trusting Allah with the next stage of their evolution, of no longer being wanderers, of no longer being slaves, but now having their own, caused them to wander the wilderness for 40 years. And we see a lot of Muslims wandering. That fear of, or whatever resistance it is that is in the heart that says, okay, I'm practicing Islam and so on and so forth, but the next thing that I should do in my knowledge, in my worship, in my personal relationships, in my character, in my community, in my society, in the world, it just causes them to be, wanderers.
And that generation who had that mindset of fear died, so that the next generation who only knew wandering and freedom, when they were told now enter, they were ready to go. Ahbab, like Allah is going to bring victory to the religion no matter what. And Allah, from his mercy and his gentleness, Al-Latif, Al-Ra'uf, Al-Rahim, gives us the time and the tarbiyah and the patience necessary to grow into our best Muslim selves if we just embark on that journey. So kill the cow, sure, but take the next step. Don't be content with just existing as a Muslim. No, take the next step however you can, with whatever means you can, in your knowledge of the Qur'an and your knowledge of the Sunnah, and your being an impactful contributor on some level in life. Otherwise, you're going to wander, and Allah will give the tawfiq to whoever is ready to actually seize it. Allah will give that success to whoever is willing to take it in their hands. And we ask Allah to use us and never replace us. Ya Rabbil Alameen.
I mean, I would just say one thing about this. They want you to think that we're wandering and that we're lost. That's what they want you to think. And they want to fool you into thinking that. But we have the answer, we have the place, we have the truth, we have the book, we have the knowledge, we have all of that. And they're just trying to stand between you and that. So I really want to emphasize, Muslims are fine. I don't want to go into this narrative of, oh, the Muslims are so lost, oh, the Muslims are so denigrated, the Muslims are so degraded, the Muslims are this and that and the other. No, Muslims are, mashallah, wonderful. The Muslims are great. And even if we follow you into the lizard's hole, we're going to come out. You won't. Even if we follow you in, we'll come out and you won't. Because that's your hole, that's not ours. You might be trying to trick us and make us follow you into there. But once we get in there and we see what is really going on, we'll come out. That's not our place. So the Muslims aren't lost. The Muslims aren't wandering. But they make you think that you are. You understand? They make you think that the Qur'an is just a book that has nice words in it, that has nice, maybe some wisdoms in it, what have you. They try to make you not read the map that you have, to make you think that you're lost. But you're not lost at all. You know, this is very important for Muslims to understand, that you are not the problem. The problem is that someone is trying to come between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The society is trying to come between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The society is trying to turn you in the wrong direction. But you know perfectly well, you've got your qibla. You know your fitrah is clean. Your fitrah is strong. Your fitrah is, your foundation is strong. You're not in the position that these people are in. Their position is very weak. Their foundation is very weak. As we were talking about in the last talk, it's as weak as the spider's web. That's not the case for our home. But they're trying to make you think that you don't have a home and that you have to now ingratiate yourself to belong in their home, which, as we talked about last time, is nothing but a trap. So it's not our fault that these people are trying to mislead us. It's not our fault that they're trying to lead us astray. No one is going to try to lead astray someone who's already astray. They're trying to lead us astray because we're guided. So Muslims have to just remind, this is why we talk about epistemological sovereignty and coming back to our sources of knowledge, because we have a stronger source of knowledge than anyone else in this world. We have the strongest source of knowledge, the Qur'an and the Sunnah. We have the strongest source of knowledge, and we don't have to turn to them for anything, and they're trying to constantly get you to turn to them, which is nothing but trying to get you to turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and getting you to turn away from your own self. So just realize that you're not lost. This is what you need to do. Realize that you're not lost. And just because everyone around you is lost, most likely, most of the people around you, the society that you're in, especially if you're over in the West, the society is lost. It doesn't mean that you are. And don't try to act like you're lost just so you can fit in with lost people.
Yeah, just for context, when we say they were wandering, this was by Allah's decree. It was always for them to get to where they needed to be. That wandering was preparation for the next step. And, it is true. Many times people have like this super doomer. Well, I don't know how anyone can read the Qur'an or even be peripherally familiar with the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even tangentially aware of our history and think that, oh my God, the Ummah is in shambles and stuff like. So I think sometimes people even, cast these aspersions towards you, Shaykh, where it's like, all you do is defend the Arab countries. It's like, no. If you know something,
you should be happy. You should be happy. If I'll defend the Arab rulers, I'll defend you too.
That's a fact. He only defends them because they're
Muslim. I'm on your side. If you're a Muslim, I'll defend you. It doesn't matter if you're a king or if you're a pauper. If you're a Muslim, I'm on your side, and you should be the same way too. And you should defend me rather than attacking me when I'm someone who will defend you. And if you're attacking someone who will defend you, I don't know what to tell you. How much more of a house slave you could be.
That's exactly where I was going next. We sick. La ilaha illallah. That's what it
wallahi,
is.
it kills me, brother. You know, I'm defending people.
Keep this in. Don't cut this out.
I'm defending people that won't even let me put foot in their land. I'm not even allowed in the GCC. I'm not allowed in the UAE. I'm not allowed in Saudi Arabia. I'm not allowed in Qatar. I'm not allowed in Egypt. I'm not allowed in any of these countries. And you think that I'm defending people because I work for them when I'm not even allowed to step foot in their countries. I don't think there's anyone who has actually done more negative publicity against the UAE than me when I worked for Detained in Dubai. You all don't know about it because all of this was outside of the Muslim sphere. This was all published in some of our worst enemy newspapers in the UK and in America. Negative stories about Dubai's treatment of prisoners, Dubai's treatment of people who get arrested, the corruption and whatnot in the UK, in the UAE court system, and all of that. I know more about it than all of you trolls. I know more about it, and I have more personal reason to have enmity towards the United Arab Emirates, but the truth is the truth. And you have to tell the truth, even if they're not going to let me walk in that country, even if they're not going to let me, even if they won't let me make Hajj because they hate me so much. You think that that I love them and that they love me, and you think that you hate them. They actually hate me more than you hate them. And you can't do anything against them more than what I've already done against them. You understand? But the truth is the truth. And like I said, if you're a sheikh, if you're a ruler, if you're a crown prince, if you're a prince or you're a king or you're a pauper or you're some silly troll on the internet, if you're a Muslim, I would defend you if you needed defending. I would defend you if someone lied about you. I would defend you if someone didn't tell the truth about you. If someone slandered you, I would defend you. But you're on here slandering and attacking me. This is
par for the course.
In Surah Taha, chapter 20, verse 44, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands Musa to speak to Pharaoh in a way that is layyin, gentle. Pharaoh, the one who literally tried to kill him when he was an infant and had slaughtered infants, a man that committed infanticide and would seize the women, and Allah ta'ala from his wisdom doesn't explain to us exactly what that means, but you can imagine. Pharaoh, the one who threatened because people believed in other than him, they believed in the true God, to crucify them, not the way that Christians' crucifix look, but chopping off the limbs on opposite side of their bodies and then stringing them up and nailing them to stakes. A historical accuracy that, of course, the Qur'an gets right, that they used to do that. I mention this to say, ikhwati, like, speaking objectively about what is happening is not an endorsement of the unethical things that are happening. No more than Musa not raising up an army from Bani Israel to overthrow Pharaoh was somehow capitulating to his tyranny. That would be ridiculous. It wouldn't make any sense at all. There's clearly a methodology that has to be in place for understanding how we as Muslims, regardless of our maqam, regardless of our station in life, have a spiritual ecosystem of how we work with each other within the confines and the constraints of the world that we live in together. And I think sometimes, Shaykh, your pragmatism and your objectivity is so rare that it is very, very difficult for people to connect those things. Like, you know, you have a video where you actually talk about all the messed up stuff just within the UAE and like its ethics and all that type of stuff and how it operates and stuff. And then you make another video talking about what's going on in Sudan and just objectively, here's what the factors are at place. It's like, unless you say it all at once and you just, you know, say, oh, this, that, and the third, it's like people can't hear it all. They just can't process it all. But this is very, you know, it's not a one-to-one, but even from, you know, you don't have to be a scholar to benefit from the deen. Of course, a scholar will someone on a scholastic journey. I ask Allah to raise us amongst our ulama, the righteous scholars, I mean. But sometimes people even compartmentalize their understanding of the Qur'an as if two things cannot be true, you know? Like, okay, well, this story about Baqarah here, but then doesn't Allah say this there? Well, yeah, two things can be true. Maybe, you know, it's like hard, that critical thinking element, complex thinking on a cognitive level, being able to take multiple things and really put it together. It's like hard for a person to imagine that you would see some optimism in the trajectory of the world with Muslim majority countries and Muslim-led governments. They share the kalima with us regardless of what you think about them as people. That means that, inshallah, they have a much higher propensity for islah in their lives and their behavior than anyone who doesn't share that. So why would you put them, that besides the point. Like, being optimistic and trusting the promises of Allah more than the people, but that Allah, just like with Yusuf, starts at a low, goes high, within Bani Israel, goes low, then goes high. This is from Sunnatullah. Why would you not want to see that, inshallah, despite the factors we disagree with today, that there can be an upward trajectory? Wallah, you got to kill that cow, man. Whatever that cows, you got to kill that thing. Inshallah.
You know, I think about, even going back to the story that we're talking about, Nabi Musa alayhi salam. There's a story in Ibn Kathir, and I don't know if it's verified or not, or if it's from the Israeliyat stories or what, but that when Nabi Musa alayhi salam was leading the people out, and Allah was telling him, go right, go left, go straight, and he came to the sea, and there's nowhere to go, and the people are coming behind them, the army is coming behind them. And Yusha is in front of him because it's dark, and Yusha is on a horse in front of him, and said, which way does your Rabb tell us to go? And he said, straight. It's the sea. Okay, I'm not going to be like one of those, one of the maybe Bani Israel who said, okay, we're lost now. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said go straight, I don't care if there's a sea in front of me or not. That's where you go. You go straight. If that's what Allah said, He said He's going to save you by this way. It doesn't matter if you can see it or not. He's going to save you by this way. Because Allah told the truth. This is why it's so important for people to understand, for Muslims to understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you the truth. Kuffar tell you lies.
Listen, people, وَمَا قَدَرَ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدَرِ. Like, you've not thought about Allah the way that Allah is due. Is meant to be thought of. 3 times in the Qur'an, Allah says this, مَا قَدْرَ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِ. You're not really thinking about your Rabb to the extent that your Rabb should really be esteemed in your heart. Just think about Musa alayhi salam. Think about this. In Surah Taha, Allah, Al-Alim, Al-Alim, Allam al-Ghuyub, Alim al-Ghayb wa Shahada, the one who knows everything, asked Musa, what's that in your right hand? He says, I have a staff that I use for sheep and stuff. Musa, throw it down. Throw it down, Musa. This thing that you've been leaning on for 10 years as a shepherd, take that, throw it down. The thing that you relied upon, throw it down. It became a snake that terrified him. Some of the Israel, hadithu an Bani Israel, wala haraj, as the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, an Abi Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu in Sahih Bukhari, narrate from the Israeliyat. There's no harm in it, as long as it doesn't contradict. So from some of the Israeliyat, it said that he ran away and had to come back. And when he came back, that staff was still a snake. Allah told him, take it in your hand and do not fear. And when he picked it up, it became a staff again. That same staff that he used to overcome the sihr of the magicians and shu'ara that then converted to Islam, that same staff that was in his hands that split the sea in Surah Al-Shu'ara, chapter 26, verses like 61 to 63. There's an ocean in front of us. Bani Israel did say, we're doomed. You led us to our deaths. They were freaking out. No, Musa, he had the yaqeen. He had the certainty in the promise of Allah. No, my Lord will guide me. Allah is not going to leave us to die here. And that same stick, Allah commanded him, strike the sea. There was your way forward. Ahbab, all of my beloved brothers and sisters online, you've got to really understand the means that you're looking at today. You see some squirming serpent and you want to hate it and stuff, but could become the very same means that Allah uses to facilitate a path forward. When you know that Allah has promised that there will be a path forward, how do you perceive the means? It may be a writhing snake to you, but when it's picked up by the right hand, it will become exactly what it needs to be. Just think ahead. Wallahi, I think, Shaykh, sometimes you say it in a way that it's like people can't make those connections unless they're already making those connections, you know. But it's there.
I think there's many other problems intellectually. Again, because when we talk about, again, with the assimilation, the assimilation of the very simplistic and emotional thought processes of the West, you've already assimilated that. You haven't actually developed your mind properly. to where you don't know the difference between explanation and advocacy. When someone is explaining to you what's going on, you interpret that as, oh, I think this is the best thing that could ever possibly happen. No, I'm explaining to you what's going on, and trying to also see the good in it, or the good outcome that could be had from it. But some people want you to only talk about, like we've talked about it also in the chat, like, for example, the case of Sudan. You want to only hear what is the moral ideal outcome. Okay, the RSF exterminated all of Sudan, being brought back under the consolidated control of the Burhan government. Gold smuggling is completely cracked down upon, and all of that is also brought under the control of the Burhan government. And then the Burhan government peacefully transfers governance to a civilian, democratically elected, free and fair elections, and a very noble man or woman is elected president of Sudan, and everything is beautiful and fine. And all of the war criminals of the RSF are put on trial and punished. Okay, yes. Now should we talk about reality? Or, it's like you need me to tell you what the ideal, optimal, and impossible moral outcome is. And if I'm talking about anything other than that, then I am against the optimal moral outcome. No, I just deal in the real world. I don't deal in a utopian fantasy.
Any critic in America that is morally grandstanding on ideal outcomes, it's like, dude, you like, how can you live in America, you accept so much for your check, for your,
get even a minimally moral outcome in your country on any level before you start talking about demanding nothing short of the optimal, perfect, maximum level moral outcome thousands of miles away in a country that you've never been and probably can't find on a map.
People see how difficult it is to maintain an Islamic moral ideal in their own local masajid plagued with politics and drama and madness. Scale it. just scale it.
I talked about this in one of the early, I believe I talked about it in one of the early Quranic Psychological Decolonization videos, which is, we don't deal in what's best, we deal in what's better. We try to achieve what's better, what's realistic, and what's better than what's worse. That's what we try to deal with. We don't try to have the best possible outcome or the best imaginable outcome, because the best outcome is only ever imaginable and not achievable. We just try to achieve what's better than what's worse. That's what we try to do. That's what that's the moral Islamic, and Allah knows best, but I believe that is the moral and Islamic approach.
Khair is ikhtiyara, it's choosing, right? Like istikhara, khair, it's like you're asking, when you say khair, like it's what is better. It's not necessarily what is the best. It's what you're choosing that would be better than like an alternative, And just tying it back to this point, because I've already kept you for a few hours here. I don't want to keep you too much longer, Chef. But
this might end up being 2 videos.
No problem. I would ask you, keep it in one, inshallah. I would ask you that. But I just want to make that connection back to the whole story of Al-Baqarah. When they wanted an answer to a question and they were told to kill a cow, they could have never imagined in their mind how killing a cow would have gotten them the answer, but it was the things that they held in their hearts for cows, which is why killing that cow was a part of the answer. And their response was, "Attakhiduna huzua," like, are you mocking us? Are you making fun of us? Do you know what we saw in Egypt with cows, and then with Samity with the cow, and now you're asking us to kill a cow? Like, are you mocking us? Are you making fun of us? No. Rather, it is through the means that you do not think will land you to where you prefer to be, what is better, that will actually take you there from the hikmah of Allah subhanahu. You have to trust Allah. And anyone trusting Allah will see past the fog of propaganda and the online dissent and this, that, and the third, and will recognize, even within their own selves, where my resistance is coming from, and see that that might be the cow that I need to kill. And we ask Allah to give us the wisdom and the patience with His plan. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ameen, ameen, ameen.
And because exactly what you're talking about is just obedience and submission. What the believers would have said to Nabi Musa alayhi salam, if they didn't have that psychological colonization in their minds, would just have been sama'na wa ta'ana. We hear and we obey. That's what the believer says. It says that if we say we want to know who killed this man, and you tell us kill a cow, we hear and we obey. If we've come up onto the shore of the ocean, and we're asking you, well, which way are we supposed to go now? And our Rabb tells us to go straight, we hear and we obey, even if it's straight into the water. Allah knows best what we're supposed to do. So just remember, don't be a house slave, don't be a field slave, but be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allahu Akbar. Yeah. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make our submission to Him easy on us. And we ask Allah to allow for us to benefit from this. I appreciate your time per usual. And anything that was beneficial in it, as Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would say, if you heard anything beneficial in it, it's from Allah alone without partners, and any mistakes or errors in it, it is only from our own selves, and it is only from our open enemy, Shaitan. So we ask Allah to accept it from us. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.